Mad as a hatter. Do you know the story behind the phrase? The insanity behind the character? The phrase was used to describe someone who's crazy or prone to unpredictable behavior. Between the 18th and 19th centuries, hatters used mercury in their creations. The mercury poisoning resulted in what was believed to be insanity and chaotic behavior. Thus, Mad as a Hatter was born. The following stories are my picks for further discussion. How the impact of mental health, relationship challenges, and circumstances can lead to murder. It goes without saying that a mental health diagnosis does not create a murderer. However, in these cases, a diagnosis left untreated, the opportunity and the right catalyst can create a monster. Won't you come with me as we enter Wonderland after dark? Don't worry, it won't hurt. Welcome to Wonderland After Dark. Submitted for your review. The Mad Hatter's pick this week. Jodi, Arias.
What's going on?
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom. We hadn't heard from him for a while. We think he's dead. His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood. I didn't go in, but I can give you the phone to someone who went in there.
Yes, please, can you?
Hello.
Hi, so what's going on?
He's dead. He's in his bedroom.
Okay.
In the shower.
Okay. How did this happen? Do you have any idea?
No, we have no idea. Everyone's been wondering about him for a few days.
She said that there was blood. So is it coming from his head? Did he touch his head?
It's all over the place.
Is there any weapons around?
No, I don't know. Not that I saw.
How many people are in the house?
How many are in the house right now? Just the 5 of us? 5 of us.
Okay, I need all of you outside.
Okay.
Hold on just a moment. Okay, you're a good friend of Travis's, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has he been depressed at all? Thinking about committing suicide, anything like that?
I don't think he's been thinking he committed suicide. He's been really depressed because he broke up with this girl, and he was all upset about that. But I don't think he would actually kill himself over that.
Has he been threatened by anyone recently?
Yes, he has. Okay. He has an ex-girlfriend that's been bothering him and following him and slashing tires and things like that.
And do you know the ex-girlfriend's name?
Do you remember? Yeah. What's his ex-girlfriend's name? Ask Taylor.
And do you know if he's ever reported it to the police?
Her name is Jodi.
Jodi Arias. Even if you're unaware of the details in this case, I'm sure it's a name that you remember. One of the most dangerous ex-girlfriends in America. Her victim was Travis Alexander. As with most infamous murder cases, the victim is typically a secondary thought. However, it's my belief that victims should be mentioned and their lives remembered. It is my intention to use this case and their relationship to highlight some areas of concern to make sure you don't make the same mistakes. It's not just the details of their relationship that stand out. It's also the behaviors of Jodi during the investigation that were stranger than fiction. A little disclaimer here, just a heads up. This episode, much like all the Mad Hatter episodes, will be exploring some graphic stories and details. This may be a trigger, so please consider your own trauma stories and experiences when making the decision to listen. So let's go ahead and get into it. Jodi met Travis September 2006. They met at a conference in Las Vegas. At the time, Alexander was 30 years old. Jodi was 28. She was living in Palm Desert, California, and was trying to become a saleswoman. She was also working as an independent photographer. Keep note of the photographer part because that's going to play a role as we move forward in this relationship. They officially started dating February 2007. However, After 5 months of a highly sexually charged relationship, they decided to part ways June 2007. But although they were no longer dating, the couple still maintained a sexual relationship. Keep note, 5 months is not a long period of time to date. And within that time frame, court records show that they exchanged over 82,000 emails within that time frame and spoke on the phone daily. Jodi even converted to Travis's religion and became a Mormon in November 2006. So one thing to consider when in relationships is the speed of that relationship. And early and quick involvement could be a potential red flag to watch out for as we see how this plays out in their relationship. So as I mentioned before, Jodi and Travis decided to part ways back in June 2007. As we see between June 2007 and December 2007, they still maintained a physical relationship, meaning sex, even though they were not an official couple. However, in December, things started to change. Travis started dating other women. He told his friends that Jodi was so jealous that she started slashing his tires and actually did it 2 times. She even went as far as contacting his new girlfriend and sending harassing emails. He knew Jodi was responsible. But even so, the sexual relationships continued. They even went on trips together to several states, including Oklahoma and Texas. Around April 2008, Jodi decided to move to California. That same month, Travis posted on his blog that this year was going to be the best year of his life. It's so interesting how things that we say come back to haunt us. Around that same time, keep in mind that Jodi was living with her grandparents, and there was a robbery that occurred at that residence. The only thing missing during that robbery was a gun. File that away. That might be important later on in the story. As we proceed between the next following months, Jodi and Travis maintained their relationship, the sexual relationship, as well as Travis still seeing what else is out there. Travis was looking for a wife, and he had said to many of his friends he just didn't see Jodi as wife material. I think many of us can see why. May 2008, Jodi posted her last entry in her blog. That entry stated, "I cannot ignore that there is an ever-present yearning and desire that pulses within me." We can only suspect that she was referring to Travis. Within the next month, she would rent a car from Budget Rent-A-Car, make a visit to Travis, and Travis ending up dead. Let's go a little further and unpack the first week of June. So as stated before, on the 2nd of June 2008, Jodi went and picked up a car from Budget Rent-A-Car. She also stopped by one of her friends, which was a potential love interest. We don't know for sure. But she asked for multiple gas cans. Weird request. We later find out that it was most likely because she did not want to stop at gas stations en route from her location to Travis. One can only guess why that was. She arrives to Travis's home, and this is where the details get a bit dark. June 4th is the suspected date where Travis lost his life. The same date Jodi arrives at his home. It was later proven that during that interaction, Jodi and Travis had sex multiple times and took explicit photos of their engagements. This was later determined due to the photos that were found on the camera. Remember how I said she was an amateur photographer. A little bit more about that as we go further on. She returns the rent-a-car on June 7th, and it's noted that the floor mats were missing and there were red stains on the front seat. I'm pretty sure you already know what those red stains might have been. Now, back where Travis's friends are now concerned, on the 9th of June, they decide to go to his home. Because it's unlike Travis not to be communicative with his friends for a long stretch of time. When his friends arrive to his apartment, they find Travis dead. They found large amounts of blood, all the way from the master bathroom, across the walls, on the floors, in the sink area. This would suggest that a bloody interaction occurred. It was ultimately determined that Travis had been shot in the right brow. The bullet was lodged in his left cheek, and that he'd been stabbed 27 times, and someone had cut his throat from ear to ear, nearly decapitating him. Investigators found several vital clues and found in Travis's bathroom and bedroom. The gun shell casing was located on the floor near the washing machine in the downstairs laundry room. But here's the interesting part. Remember when I told you to remember about Jodi being an amateur photographer? They found a camera in the washing machine. Apparently, the camera was thrown in the washing machine and run through the wash cycle as an attempt to get rid of evidence. Plot twist, they were able to retrieve the photos on the camera that places Jodi there at the scene. Not only does it place her there at the scene, the photos showed their romantic interaction, but showed Travis in the shower. There were also photos that what looked to be Travis laying on the floor of the shower after the murder. And DNA evidence, you want to know about that? It was traced all within the blood that were found on the walls and the floors of the crime scene, not to mention a bloody handprint left at the scene. June 13th, Jodi actually posts a photo gallery on her MySpace page titled "In Loving Memory of Travis." Friends told reporters Jodi was completely and totally obsessed with him. She wouldn't let him go, and whenever he would try to sever ties, she would threaten to kill herself. He would tell her he didn't want anything to do with her, and she would show up at his house unannounced. We knew it was her. We didn't want it to be, but we knew it was. Keep in mind this point of threatening suicide to keep somebody in a relationship. All of these things are going to be tied together. The remainder of this episode will not cover the confusing behaviors of Jodi during the investigation and trial. You can watch all of that online and in documentaries ad nauseum. But we will focus on the behaviors that people should be aware of when in and ending relationships that can be indicators of dangerous things to come. Now, many people ask, did Jodi suffer any mental health diagnoses? The interesting fact of the matter is there is not one confirmed diagnosis for Jodi. There were up to 4 psychologists who testified during her trial, none of them agreeing. One of them stating that she potentially had borderline personality disorder, while that was disputed from the defense, saying that it wasn't. A lot of individuals who look at this case and professionals in the field state that they can see an argument for narcissistic personality disorder and even antisocial personality disorder. However, None of this has been actually confirmed. And one thing we have to also take into account, being a mental health professional, is to understand the DSM-5 is a diagnostic tool. It's used to identify and assess personality challenges, behavioral challenges, mental health challenges, to assist in correcting and using elements to help allow this person to live a normal life. It's not a tool used to determine malicious intent in criminal behavior. So we want to keep that in mind. In people throwing around personality disorders, borderline personality disorders, and things of that nature can hurt the understanding of that personality disorder and turning it into a negative aspect in personalities. We have to understand that just having a certain personality disorder or mental health challenge does not mean you will go out and do harmful, hurtful, deadly things. I want to make that very clear. And again, Jodi wasn't diagnosed with anything. However, if you do look at some of her behaviors just based on the trial, there is a argument for narcissistic personality disorder. This is different from somebody having narcissistic tendencies or behaviors. I'm the first to state that almost everybody has an element of narcissistic behaviors. We're human. A personality disorder is an actual diagnosis. And some of the things you can see just in the relationship with Travis and her behaviors after the fact could suggest that that is a potential. But again, she was never actually diagnosed with anything. So what we want to do is look at her behaviors as it relates to a harmful, deadly ex-girlfriend. We do see in testimony, court testimony, as well as interviews, that she stalked Travis. And not just stalked Travis, she also stalked his new girlfriends and harassed both of them. In surveys, when you're looking at stalkers, 5.1 million women, 2.4 million men have been stalked. 1 in every 6 women, 1 in every 19 men have been stalked in their lifetime. Stalking increases the lethality of a relationship. What does lethality mean? The potential for harm and danger. There's other lethality indicators in this case that I wanted to highlight. Threats of homicide and or suicide, if someone's left, increases likelihood of murder by 15%. Now, I won't go into profiles of offenders. It is something that I also study, but there's different personality and profile types of offenders. But threats of suicide and homicide increases that likelihood of murder by 15%. And we saw this in interactions between Jodi and Travis. We also hear the fact that Travis's friends say that she was obsessed with him. Obsession also increases the lethality of a relationship. Stalking, access to weapons, and separation and ending of a relationship are the other factors that are noted within this connection. Again, as I told you guys to remember, access to weapons. The gun that was used to shoot Travis in the head was later determined the same gun that was missing from Jodi's grandparents' house. And as we all know, they did end the relationship on official terms, but they continued that sexual connection after the fact. And I will be one of the first people to say, if you're dealing with somebody where there's obsession, where there's stalking, where there's manipulation, these are all indicators that this could be a potentially dangerous experience. And knowing that when you separate or end a relationship that have these indicators, that's going to be the most dangerous time. And one thing I want to mention as well, there's no evidence of Jodi being hurtful, harmful, abusive in other relationships based on court documentation. As a child, it was stated that she did harm her younger brother. Her parents even said that they stopped believing anything she said at the age of 14. She ran away from home when she was a senior in high school. So there are indicators that there were some challenges in her home life. But when you look at her past relationships, there really wasn't any huge indicators that she was capable of doing something so vicious. Now, I will state she had multiple stories for what occurred, but the proof was in the forensic investigation. What I want to highlight, though, specifically in this case, abusive relationships do not have to be violent. They can be emotional, they can be psychological, right? And the victim is not always female. The key is to be able to identify abusive behaviors and know how to navigate through them. And as I mentioned before, stalking is most common between relationships of the victim and the perpetrator being current or former intimate partners. So you want to have an awareness of that. But the most alarming statistic when it comes to stalking, over 50% of victims who were murdered reported stalking to police before they were killed by their stalkers. And when looking at stalking, there's a time where you're at a greater risk for violence. That's when there's an issue of direct threats of violence, in this case, her threatening suicide, expression of jealousy of the victim's relationships with others during the relationship, which we saw that very clearly, and use of illegal drugs. Now, there is not any confirmation or statement of drug use, but hitting 2 out of 3 is a cause of concern. So again, this episode is not to diagnose Jodi for having any type of mental health challenge, and as I stated before, there was never one really confirmed. But she did have behaviors that you would determine or classify as dark psychology. This Mad Hatter pick was to highlight the unforeseen and sometimes overlooked behaviors that may lead to deadly outcomes, or at the very least, disruption. If you or someone you know is being stalked and harassed, or you just have concerns of their safety, there's help. In the description box below, I will post some resources for you as a support person, or even if you are the victim, but ways to educate yourself and others about what to look for so you won't become an episode picked by the Mad Hatter.